Okay, we're live from Phoenixville Public Library and Parts Unknown. Good evening, Mark Pinto here with you from the library, and welcome to our semi-annual celebration of local writing talent that we call Open Mic Night for Writers. It's great to have so many writers with us tonight and other folks who have tuned in. We have writers from a wide range of backgrounds and genres tonight. We will be going in reverse order by last name this time around. So our writers will be each reading for 5 minutes or 4 pages, whichever comes first. And when you hear an alarm, go ahead, Evan, and unmute yourself and play the alarm for everybody.
Alarm. Trying to remember where the alarm is. Is it under?
Alarm will sound.
Wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without.
Where's the alarm, Mark?
Got it there, Evan?
Where is it located?
Oh, on whatever device you're using to time.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, obviously, I'm sorry. I had it all set up, and then I accidentally closed the window. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Hold on 1 second.
All right, well, while Evan is doing that, I'll just instruct the writers to make any intro to your reading brief. You'll have the opportunity immediately following your reading to promote any books. And we ask you to stay muted until it's your turn to read. Please feel free, everyone who's logged in, to send chats among yourselves tonight. And we'll give you the opportunity to unmute at the end for a kind of free-for-all, I guess. Evan, you got the alarm?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sound it.
Okay. Can you hear that?
I can hear it, yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of a very gentle alarm.
Okay.
All right. So when you hear that sound, wrap it up as soon as you can. All right, so we can move on to the next writer. So our very first writer tonight, he always gets to be first because, you know, he's the leader of our writers group, the fiction writers group here at Phoenixville Public Library, and that is Evan Harbaugh. He's a mental health therapist by profession, but he writes in his spare time and has self-published 4 novellas to date. Evan is also a trained researcher for social sciences and received an award for research as an undergrad. Evan enjoys traveling and learning about geography and other cultures. Evan has also given many trainings for several topics, including LGBTQ+ competency. Please welcome Evan.
Thanks, Mark. Okay. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a story I had yet to finish. It's called Seraph. Michael's wings formed slowly at first. He felt the immaculate feathers come into being one by one, like good deeds manifesting from spiritual to physical. The feathers began forming on his back and continued until all 3 pairs were extended, huge, and majestic. He felt his wings become what they were, both together and separate. Together, his wings were the essence of God's righteousness, the incorruptibility of God's true soul, the Holy Spirit. Separate, each of his 3 pairs of wings gave him power in different ways. Michael sensed that the first set of the wings embodied the fear of God, respect and reverence for him and his noble purpose, and revealed that mankind was indeed created in his own likeness. These upper wings were pure white, like freshly fallen snow, but 1,000 times brighter. They were to be used to shield his face while in God's presence, and also gave Michael the ability to shape reality. In fact, when he tried to begin shielding his face with these wings, they were so bright that they almost blinded him. The light was so intense that he knelt in response, prostrating himself in the same light that was God, a total whiteout. When the second set of wings had developed, Michael felt a distinct and soulful rush of esteem for his father, himself, and the virtues of faith and hope. His faith in humanity and the hope he instills in all human lives. These middle wings possess the greatest wingspan of his three pairs, and as such, these wings were meant to propel him through the world, across the skies, and from plane to plane. He also could feel their strength in his body. His body was now incredibly strong, physically in addition to spiritually. The third and last set of wings, iridescent, shining with the beauty of a rainbow, and were composed of God's divine purity, the grace of his way and the mercy of his soul. These feathers were tickled as they were created. He giggled once and then steeled himself out of reverence. The purpose of these lower wings was to cover Michael's feet while before God, so he may eternally follow in his footsteps, and therefore also granted him immortality. He was filled with love, and his heart being warmed as if by the rays of the sun, so bright and wonderful that nothing could tarnish it or make it fade. Now you are love, the steward of my love and the love of God, his father explained. And as love can do anything, move mountains and end wars, so can you shape reality at will. Throughout the history of the world, humankind has been guided with an unseen hand, my hand, he sighed. Every major change in the world has been carefully considered and overseen by me. I guess the first reader is Gary Zenker. By day, Gary Zenker is a marketing strategist and copywriter, creating marketing plans and writing copy for every new media known, and a few that have yet to be invented. By night, Gary writes flash fiction, which has been featured in a variety of anthologies, including Chicken Soup for the Soul, Laughter, published in 2020. He is also the creator of Writer's Blocks, the storytelling game and prompt generator for writers of all genres. Take it away, Gary. Hold on, we can't hear you yet, Gary.
You need to unmute, Gary.
Okay, there we go. Thanks, I'm not used to being first. This one's called Topsy Turvy. The Brentworths' party was a sea of black tuxes, accompanying little black or red cocktail dresses, highlighting, for the most part, just the right amount of cleavage. A short, stocky man with Fred Flintstone stubble, a bad comb-over, and a fat stogie between his fingers approached to tell me about an exception. I just saw your wife flash before my eyes. You mean you saw your life flash before your eyes? No, your wife, he repeated. Flash. You know, lift her top and jiggle her goodies. He cupped his thick, hairy hands to jiggle large, invisible breasts in front of him. Time to go find her. She only does it at society parties after cosmopolitans. I'm pretty sure they feed her the drinks. People walk past me, giving me the look. Where's she now, I ask. Down by the punch bowl. Quite a line of guys. I just thought you should know. Thanks. I'll go save her from herself. Just look for the crowd. Her tendency to flash after drinking keeps our social calendar pretty full. We don't accept all the invitations. No one could. I'm viewed as her designated driver. If they could address the invitation to her alone, they probably would. Nobody really cares where I go or who I speak with. Most of the time, they're just as happy when I can't be easily found. When I enter the room, her top is back in place. The circle of people surrounding her opens up for me with mixed looks of guilt and smugness. I put my arm around her. Had a bit to drink, I ask her. Not that mush, she slurs. Everyone's looking at me for a reaction. I don't give them one. I wrap my jacket around her. Need any help, a voice offered? No, I can get her to the car. We're going to call it a night. Out in the rush of the cool air and away from the crowd, she sobers up quickly. So what'd they say? About what, I ask. My performance, silly. Oh, the usual. You seemed happy. You light up the party. What a perfect rack you have. All natural, too. That gym membership has really paid off. With their eyes focused on my friends, it's elementary sleight of hand. They think I've downed a half dozen drinks. One of the benefits of being a former magician's assistant, I laughed, and all that attention on what you're doing means they don't look for me. They want to see how far they can get you to go. Even the women. Some of them like it even better than the men. They wish that they could command the attention I do. I'm sure that's true from a psychological perspective. I just read a paper from Harvard's medical school that was exploring the concept that, enough of that psychobabble, she says. You know what I want to know. Really, I teased. The paper was quite revealing. My beautiful wife smiled, showing her perfectly straight and white teeth. Tell me. I relent. 2 platinum and diamond bracelets, a pair of earrings, and Alison Brentworth's ruby and diamond necklace you've always admired. Ooh, I want to keep that one, just for a little while, please. I shake my head no. You know the rules. Okay, she sighs. This is so much better than scaling the roofs and working on those alarm systems in the middle of the night. We can be in bed and asleep by 1 a.m. You were right, she admits. How many times do I have to tell you that? 2 more times this month. When they eventually discover the things missing from the safe, they'll never connect it to us or the party. I think we'll be getting an invitation from the Kleinfelds for their party next month. He was quite taken with you tonight. And he'll be quite taken also, she laughed. I should wear something special. Mind if I take a couple of hundred for an appropriate red gown? Fine, but don't go crazy. They're more interested in what'll be coming out of it than what you in it. What will we do when these things drop to my waist? She cups them in her hands and lets them fall. I hate the idea of surgery. By then, Jimmy and Joni will have graduated med or law school. You could always become a nurse and take things from retirement homes while the old folks sleep, but leave them their teeth and their dignity. Maybe I'll just steal all my stuff back from you. What have I got for you to steal? You've already stolen my heart, my love. She wrapped her arm around me and pulled me into her. She touched her lips to mine. My heart jumped like it always does when she kisses me. You are the perfect man, she whispered. I am, I nodded and started walking again, but put the necklace back in my pocket. I felt you slide it out. You are seriously out of practice. I was wrong. I don't even think you could take that job at the retirement home. Almost perfect man, she sighed and wedged the jewelry back into my pocket. I held the car door open and lightly swatted her ass as she climbed in. Can't bullshit a bullshitter. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Okay. Kathleen Takalowski, who goes by the nickname Tack, is working on a series of short stories which, when taken together, form a sort of fictional memoir. While the stories have a somewhat autobiographical tone, they depart, some more widely than others, from the really transpired, choosing rather to explore what might have been. Tonight, she shares one of her stories that hangs fairly close to true events. Go ahead, Tack.
This piece is called Patience. Where are you from? This question is from my new dentist, a white man with white hair, a white lab coat, and a white face mask. I know this question is an attempt at small talk, a way to get to know a person, but it's never been an easy one for me to answer. Citizen of the world, I chirp, trying to keep chit-chat to a minimum. The truth is, I was born in a country I only lived in for 2 years, and where none of my family is a citizen or resident. And every year or two after that, I moved to a new house and a new school, and that even as an adult, I don't identify strongly with any one place. Got any kids? Nope. A husband? Is this the census or a dentist appointment? I have a wife, but even in this day and age, one doesn't lead with homosexuality. Nope, no kids, no husband. Could you have a look at my teeth then? I see from your registration form that you live in the town where I went to college, about 20 miles north of here, right? Before I have a chance to confirm, he continues in his same chipper tone. They used to have a couple of great little places to eat up there. Do they still? This guy is bound and determined to get me chatting. Not if you're a vegetarian, I want to, but do not say. In small town America, you cannot be lesbian and vegetarian. It's just too much for heterosexual carnivores. When I first arrived to the area several years ago to take a position teaching at the college my dentist had apparently attended years ago, I ventured into a coffee shop on Main Street with two of my new colleagues. I was relieved to see butternut squash and vegetable soup on the blackboard menu. Are either of these two soups vegetarian? I inquired. They have lots of vegetables, if that's what you mean. Great, but are they made with beef stock or chicken broth or the like? I've learned to probe even when the menu says kale and beet salad with vegan cheese. The person taking our order at the register paused, looked up, took a glance at my two colleagues, and then back at me. You're not from around here, are you? Seems where I'm not from is readily identifiable. I chuckled politely, as one learns to do in these situations. My colleagues advised me to order the garden salad. Back at the dentist's office, I simply say that I prefer to cook at home, which is the opposite of true. I neither like to cook nor be at home. I would prefer to be eating on the veranda of a beachside hotel with a personal chef. I didn't become a vegetarian or a lesbian to be difficult. In the case of the former, a cow tried to kill me. In the case of the latter, well, no need to get into the details regarding my marriage to a man. Back to the bovine. I was eating leftover tacos al carbon when a piece of beef got lodged in my windpipe. I made the thumb and index finger around the throat sign to indicate to my then husband that I was unable to breathe. I know we said we weren't going to get into the ex-husband, but stay tuned. He did save my life. He stood up, as did I. He performed the Heimlich maneuver, and even though it's been out of vogue in the life-saving world for decades, it worked. The offending heifer flew from my throat, splat, to a spot on the floor near our iguana tank. That was close, I said, reflecting on my near-death experience. Did you know I was choking because I was doing the international choking sign? He looked up from his ear of corn, nonplussed. I knew you were choking because you weren't breathing. Yeah, that too, I shrugged, but still kind of wishing to be acknowledged for my quick thinking despite a lack of oxygen to the brain. I haven't eaten meat since. Without saying a word, I look up at my dentist and pull a toothy grin in an effort to remind him of why I have come in. That's when he says, we're going to start by getting some x-rays, okay? Finally, a topic I can sink my teeth into.
Thank you, Tack. Okay, next is Leslie Stack, who is a writer, musician, camper, and teacher who loves being on the water or in a museum. You can usually find her doing research behind dark glasses on a park bench. She lives in a house with her husband where the books are plotting a takeover. Okay, there
Wow,
you go,
these are-
Leslie.
Thank you. These are hard acts to follow. This is just lovely. The color of being broken. They're always brand new at first, full of possibilities and hope in what could be. The Crayola 64 box with every hue of her dreams. Soldiers standing tall, awaiting orders, their glistening cylinders held within each color's unblemished paper, perfectly shaped with their pointed tips lined up in groups of 16 in 4 rows. She's 7 years old and has chosen the perfect color, smells the wax, feels the slippery paper between her small fingers. A brand new page with an outline of a bouquet of 5 balloons invites her, waiting. She imagines how beautiful the picture will be once she's added the colors. Where will she hang it? She holds the crayon firmly in her fingers, tracing the lines to make them darker, flipping the cylinder around to lightly shade in the area within the dark lines. It is perfection. What could go wrong? She's colored in 2 of the 5 balloons when suddenly her hand slips and a streak of color goes outside of the lines. It's ruined. She tries to smudge it out, but it's there, staring her in the face. Failure. Why bother going on? She then thinks that maybe she can fix it later as she turns her attention to the next balloon. The remainder of that one errant line makes her bear down harder, and she hears the high-pitched snap and feels her hand buckled towards the paper. The breath goes out of her as she sees the tip of the crayon separated on the paper, and then at the larger stub still in her hand, the paper ripped in between the 2 parts. Peeling away the paper on the longest piece, she places it in the crayon sharpener on the side of the box, turning and turning until the end is a semblance of what it once was. Perfect, no longer. Flawed. Holding on to the shadow of the crayon, she begins again, outlining the edges, shading in the larger spaces within. The crayon's color is still useful, beautiful, transformative. Even with the scars from the trauma of its short life that makes its outer shell look different than all of the rest in the box, this crayon lives on to create beauty. But because of what it went through, it's now shorter than the others, but less likely to break again. The strength behind its history brings clarity to the beauty inside, careful with the life that it has been given, knowing that in one snap, it can all go away. She and the crayon together have created something beautiful. She places the crayon back in its space. It stands wobbly next to the perfect soldiers waiting their turn, left safely in the box. She tucks a roll of Scotch tape deep in her pocket. Twisting in her chair, she reaches for the 2 pink 4-arm crutches that are always waiting for her. Placing them one at a time between her wrist and her elbow, the aluminum feels cool against her skin. She sighs softly and smiles as she slowly lifts herself from the chair. Taking one slow step at a time, she moves towards the wall, her picture of beautiful balloons with a perfect flaw tucked under her arm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. Next we have James F. Sassaman, who is a novelist writing literary fiction. He is also an adjunct professor at Drexel University and the defense litigator before the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. His current work in progress is called Dempsey's Diner. Framed by Watergate, this novel chronicles the end of the hippie era in a small town, nocturnal, underground, underworld setting. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, this is entitled Ipsy Dixit. If I know Dempsey's Diner, and I do know Dempsey's Diner, Dwayne Derrick's viewing tonight will be the social event of the season. I asked the foreman for a pass. He knows which viewing. He moonlights as hearse driver for the funeral home. Oh, so that's one of your buddies. What was he, drug pusher or drug buyer? He was a friend. Well, I saw him lay down the slab. The coroner told me, once these guys get on that stuff, they never get off. Then he looks up expecting a retort, but I never argue with Ipsy Dixit. Dempsey's Diner is here in force. I see Helen the Hog, Potts Hill Polly, Crazy Margot, the Wall Boys, and Soapy Bar. When my time at the casket comes, I find that we're the only 2 dudes from Dempsey's wearing suits, both decked out in navy blue. Mine is a chalk stripe number, while Dwayne is sporting pinstripes. Whoever laid him out was careful to comb his hair over his shoulders. I expected makeup, but not rings. I don't remember Dwayne being a regular Ringo, but here he is with rings on both hands. Homemade rings from Tablespoons. Only use I see is wearing brass knuckles in advance, but Dwayne was no fighter, so he must have taken up the Ringo look. Later, baby. Outside, crowd size is building. I hear Slim and I turn to see Pee-wee, who asks where we could find Herb, and I say, follow me. We cross High and stand at the retaining wall of the Holt School. First, I case High Street for police. Then I reach up and grab my stash, take out 1J, and replace the stash. Slim, is this cool? People are on the other side of the street, Pee-wee. When the man drives by, he's looking over there, not at us in front of the stupid wall. They're looking for big-time dealers, hardened criminals, not us. We're just a couple of Holt School boys. Far out. You mean farm out? What's farm out? That's Berks County talk. This is Potts Hill, drug capital of the East Coast. Look, Slim, there goes Benish. That would be Detective Benish, known for his hatred of Fatty and Lucky Viscardi. Pee-wee splits and I head back to the viewing. Some dude walks out at a fast clip. Nothing unusual except wearing shades. He hustles to a 69 Chevelle with the chick driver who starts the engine. Somebody whispers, Kohler, and I put shades together with a name. The pusher man himself, Randy Kohler, Potts Hill's long-standing heroin dealer. Next, the 72 Grand Prix pulls up, driven by a chick also. And who steps out in a double-breasted suit with a high-crowned Superfly hat? None other than the white Superfly himself, Gilbert Yoder, who dashes by and attracts attention, unlike Kohler, who came and went unnoticed. Gilbert has the sense to doff his hat at the casket. Gilbert dashes by again, and I stop him. Gilbert, did you hear about Rusty killing himself? Just heard tonight, Slim. Otherwise, I'd have been there, man. Gilbert takes off, same way Kohler did. I do detect a rhythm to these proceedings, and I'm expecting a third car with a female chauffeur, but none shows up. But these proceedings do not end just yet. An entourage of thugs makes its way toward the funeral home. Someone is walking inside this entourage, consisting of 2 thugs in front, 2 thugs on each side, and 2 thugs pulling up the rear. They make a sharp turn at the sidewalk entrance, careful not to set foot on the lawn. Coordinated thugs. No surprise when the entourage exits the same way. Although I did not recognize the protected one earlier, now I see a cheekbone scar, which looks like an entry wound of a bullet. This can only be Carson City Carson, who answered a knock on his door only to receive a bullet in the face, which has never been removed. His would-be assassin has never been caught, and his speed business has never stopped. Carson just lowered his profile. After the viewing, I head back to my pad. I see the kitchen light on. That means that Jimmy's still up. On my way to Rusty's burial, funeral cars drove right past the newspaper. Jimmy saw his own car and came out to watch, and he just shook his head. Not just for Rusty's suicide, but the timing of Dwayne's overdose 3 days later. Jimmy knew that Rusty was my friend, but he did not know about Dwayne. I explained that I knew him slightly, and then he asked, user or dealer? Dealer. Then I felt the time was right to tell him. I've seen all I can absorb for a screenplay by hanging out at Dempsey's. I decided to go deeper and run with the Viscardis, both Fatty and Lucky. You know who they are. Been reading their rap sheets in the papers for years. There's nothing to worry about. I don't do their methamphetamine. I have no aspirations to become an accessory to narcotics or arson or safecracking. Well, don't tell your mother any of this. I only tell her I'm studying Thomas Aquinas. I know. She's thrilled. Let's keep it that way. On that note, I figured Jimmy wasn't alarmed by my putting him wise to my next move. Right now, I figured right, because as soon as I step into the kitchen, Jimmy says, how's everything with Murder Incorporated? That's it.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Okay, so our next person is Jeff Markowitz. Jeff is the author of 5 mysteries, including the award-winning dark comedy Death and White Diamonds. His new book, Hit or Miss, is part detective story, part historical fiction, part coming-of-age story, and was an Amazon hot new release in political fiction. Jeff spent more than 40 years creating community-based programs, services, and supports for children and adults with autism before retiring in 2018 to devote more time to writing. Jeff is past president of the New York chapter of Mystery Writers of America. He lives in Monmouth Junction, New Jersey, with his wife, Carol, and 2 cats, Virgil and Aeneas. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Evan. And I want to thank Lanny for alerting me to the possibility of joining you tonight. I'm going to read a brief excerpt from my new book, Hit or Miss. It's a detective story set in the summer of 1970 against the backdrop of the anti-war movement going on at the time. I'm going to read a brief scene that's actually not political. Artie Melman had never been north of New York. He felt like he'd left civilization in the rearview mirror. Welcome to Breakwater, Maine, the sign said. A few miles south of Breakwater, he passed the Maine State Correctional Facility in Thomaston. Perhaps he was just being sentimental, but it made him feel closer to his father. At least there was lobster just out of the water and available for less than $1 from a guy with a roadside setup. We don't get many New Yorkers up here, the lobsterman said. I wouldn't think so. Artie laughed at the idea taking shape in his head. Where can a guy find a bed around here? The lobsterman scratched his whiskers. There's some nice motels in Camden. Go north another 15, maybe 20 miles. But he'd gone as far north as he was willing to go. I mean, here in Breakwater. The lobsterman thought for a moment and then directed Artie to Mary's boarding home on Grand. Mostly, she rents rooms to men on release from the prison. The lobsterman drilled his eyes on Artie. You'll fit right in. Not me, Artie answered him. The lobsterman smiled. I reckon she'll rent you a room anyway. It was a short drive to Mary's boarding home on Grand Street. A pretty young woman was weeding the flower bed, her brown hair tied back in a ponytail, except for random loose strands of hair that she brushed from her face while she gardened. Artie tucked in his t-shirt and ran his hands through unruly hair. I'm looking for Mary. The young woman stood up. Her knees were caked with dirt, as were her garden gloves. You found me. She removed one glove and extended a hand. Mary Townsend. Artie Melman. Are you looking for a room, Mr. Melman? The lobsterman sent me. Mary chuckled. It sounded like a wind chime. I have a vacant room on the 2nd floor, she said. $12 per week. I'll take it. Don't you want to see it first? What for? You're not in trouble, are you, Mr. Melman? No, ma'am. Just need a place to stay is all. Mary Townsend studied his face. Welcome to my home. I hope you like it. Artie sat in his room waiting for supper. Unfamiliar with the etiquette of boarding home meals, he didn't want to make a wrong first impression. Artie entered the dining room precisely at 6. Mary and the other 3 tenants looked up from their seats. Trays of food were already on the table. She pointed to a vacant seat. Would you like to say grace, Mr. Melman? When he was a little boy, his family said grace nightly. Artie always thought it was odd how his father could come home from work, sit down at the table, fold his hands, and say grace. Artie took his time sitting down, fumbling with the chair while he gathered his thoughts. Bless this food, bless this home, bless each of the mugs who sit at this table, that we may be at peace for as long as we are here. Amen. When you put it that way, how long will you be here? The question came from across the table, from a squirrely guy with a high-pitched voice and a nervous tick. Mary blushed. Where are my manners? We must do proper introductions. She looked around the table at her boarders. Mr. Melman, that's Roy Duclos. Next to Roy is Edmund Webster. He doesn't talk much, so don't take it personally. And at the far end of the table, I believe you've already met the lobsterman, Josiah Tuttle. Enough with the chit-chat, Roy said. What I want to know is, what were you in for? The lobsterman didn't give Artie time to respond. I don't think he was in for anything. Isn't that right, Artie? Remember the rules, gentlemen. Mr. Melman is entitled to his privacy. He will tell us about his past, or not, when he's ready. Edmund reached for the pot roast. He took a couple of slices and handed Artie the tray. No one spoke until dinner was finished. Mary got up to clear the table. Why don't you go out on the porch? It's a lovely night. I'll bring you a cup of tea. Mary's boarding home had a wraparound porch with a row of Adirondack chairs. Joe was already outside smoking a Chesterfield. Artie bummed a cigarette and joined him on the porch. Mary brought them each a cup of tea. Joe waited until she was inside. You were telling the truth. About what? The last mailing address wasn't the Maine State Correctional Facility, was it? I can assure you that I have never been incarcerated in Thomaston or anywhere else. Joe gave that some thought, but I get the feeling that you've had some personal experience with the criminal justice system. It wasn't a question, so Artie didn't bother with an answer. Joe puffed on his Chesterfield. Just so you don't allow your troubles to follow you here. He blew a couple of perfectly formed smoke rings. Mary's had more than her share of troubles already, if you know what I mean. Thank you.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. So next we have Lanny Larsenese. I'm probably butchering that, I'm sorry. He's been writing fiction and nonfiction for the past 8 years. His early short stories were successive first prize winners at 3 Philadelphia Writers' Conferences. He has authored a memoir, Women, One Man's Journey, and 2 crime novels, I Detest All My Sins and Death in the Family, the latter of which was released January 1st of this year. His latest, Fire in the Belly, a story modeled on the 1985 bombing of a row house by Philadelphia Police Department, will be released during 2021. His work in progress is a novelization of the Ira Einhorn murder of Holly Maddox, whose mummified body was found in a steamer trunk in his closet. Lonnie appears tonight under the auspices of Crime Writers Caravan and Authors Collective. Go ahead, Lonnie.
Can you hear me, folks?
Yep.
Okay, good. This is from my short story, At His Father's Knee. Bradley Moffat ran reluctantly toward the alley where the armed suspect was likely to be. The plan was simple: cover the rear while his partner Rick went around the side. The alley was dark. Bradley tiptoed slowly, crouched low. His left hand gripped his shaking right hand holding the Glock. The rustling shadows of darting rats were unsettling enough, but the others, the ones that stood their ground, watched him through ruby eyes while their noses twitched as if sniffing the stink of Bradley's panic. A dark figure leaped from behind a dumpster and charged toward him. He froze, dropped the Glock, and expelled a muffled moan. The man ran by him as Bradley fell to his side and covered his head with his arms. The man's footsteps were quickly absorbed by the night. He got up and slapped at the dirt and tiny shards of glass clinging to his uniform. No matter, he was alive. He had it with being a hero. The last time he tried it, Karen died. If he had left well enough alone 3 years ago, Jonathan would still have his mother instead of a stream of dippy babysitters, including Bradley's whack job sister, Linda. His partner, Rick, came around in a rush and shined his light on Bradley, who by now was looking for his Glock. A tsunami of shining brown roaches scurried from the light, looking like the ground moving, subsumed by the darkness. Rick's light lingered on his unwanted partner, moving it from head to foot, taking his measure, as if counting the feathers, which the guys in the 18th meant chicken. Rick shook his head but said nothing. "You got your drop on me," Bradley said. "Yeah, right," Rick said, eyeing Bradley's soiled uniform. "Let's get out of here." Bradley looked in on his sleeping son and pulled the bedroom door quietly shut. "What did Jonathan have for homework?" he asked his sister, Linda. "I don't know, something with numbers and write something about the sun or something like that." "Were you smoking?" he asked. She was stoned, a 44-year-old unreconstructed hippie, Dylan maniac and deadhead, with a long string of boyfriends, each for seldom more than 3 months. Still, she was family and loved Jonathan as her own. Yeah, she said, looking away, I fired one up, but not till after he went to bed. Her airy voice was barely audible. He's 12 years old, Linda. Don't you think he knows the smell of pot? It's not okay. The odor will be gone by the time he wakes. Look, if you don't want me to. But other than her smoking, she was a kind, giving woman. And Jonathan listened to her, talked to her. The boy needed a woman in his life, not to take his mother's place, nobody could, but a voice softer and gentler than Bradley's. It was 1 a.m. He watched as her 82 Volvo crept down Tasker at 5 miles an hour, the pace of her senses slogging through wacky weed. He filled a jelly glass with brandy, plopped into a chair, and set the phone on his lap. His girlfriend Donna wanted him to call, even if late. He punched out her number. Rough day, you sound exhausted, she said. A drug dealer we were chasing went around me and got away. Were you hurt? Every day in a cop's life was dangerous, she knew that. But tonight was a sore point. She had poked at his new game of pretend. Be a cop, but don't get hurt. A notion his father, the captain, would sneer at. Do I sound hurt? He snapped. I'm all right. I just wish I could have nabbed him. You beat up on yourself too much, she said. How's Jonathan? Linda smoked dope in the house again. Look, I don't feel like talking. Is that okay? He was taking his struggles out on her. She deserved better. I gotta go. He set the phone in his cradle and drained a Scooby-Doo glass of amber anesthetic. It burned his throat, but couldn't burnish his soul. That would have to wait. Yeah, folks, thank you.
Great, thanks, Lonnie. Okay, our next presenter, Lisa Cohn, is the award-winning author of To the Moon and Back, A Childhood Under the Influence, as well as The Power of Thoughtful Leadership. She is a leadership consultant, executive coach, and keynote speaker who works with C-suite leaders in Fortune 50 organizations and not-for-profits, helping them become more thoughtful, more present, intentional, and authentic in their leadership and their lives. Lisa will be delivering a keynote, Discovering Your Path to Wholeness, for the Women's Resource Center annual luncheon on April 30th. The WRC helps women and girls in crisis in southeastern Pennsylvania, and the first 100 people who register for the luncheon will receive a signed copy of To the Moon and Back. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hello and thank you. So I am going to read an excerpt from To the Moon and Back. And to start to set it up, the way I describe my childhood is the best seats I ever had at Madison Square Garden were at my mother's wedding. And the best cocaine I ever had was from my father's friend, the judge. I grew up in a religious cult on one hand, and that's the side I'm going to talk about, and then life of sex, drugs, and squalor with my dad. But I grew up in a religious cult, and by the time I got to my senior year of high school, I did have a boyfriend, long story there, which is a sin, huge story there. And I went off to college determined to break up with him and go back to my Messiah and to God, and I did not. And this is what happened. At Cornell, they joke about people committing suicide by jumping off the bridges. Someone had painted jumping zones and watching zones on the suspension bridge, and all the freshmen had heard a rumor that you were guaranteed an automatic 4.0 should your roommate jump. Before a stressful exam, Annie and I would teasingly suggest the option to each other in order to win a good grade. These days, they have nets under the bridges as a deterrent and safety measure. Then came the day that option became real. I was heading back to the dorms from my job at a daycare center off campus. On my way home, I took the Stewart Avenue Bridge over Fall Creek Gorge. Halfway across the bridge that afternoon, I stopped and stood still, unable to continue. I gazed down the road toward where I was going and over the railing to the rocks below. I could hear water splashing and, if I listened for it, birds singing in the distance. I could feel the sun beating down. Frozen there, seeing but not seeing, hearing but not hearing, thoughts of plunging to the bottom of the gorge surged inside my head. I know it sounds cliched, but the minutes passed in a super slow motion, and I didn't think I could go on, not the rest of the way across the bridge, and not with my life after the choices I had made. Each day was taking me further and further from the church and all I had known, believed, and loved. Self-condemnation and remorse simmered inside me like a newly active volcano about to erupt. Everything hurt too much and was way too hard. Way too hard. I stared up at the sky, tears in my eyes, desperate to reconnect with the God I'd known through much of my childhood, longing for the sense of purpose and meaning that has sustained me for so long, begging for the all-consuming doubt and anguish within me to be lifted. High places are known to fill one with an urge to jump, to experience the sensation of falling, called high place phenomenon. But my feelings that day were different. It was almost as if I was empty, with a vacant pit inside me that echoed my torment and despair. I stood there with the gorge below and contemplated the fall. How long would it take? What would it be like? It was a beautiful autumn day. The sun was shining, the leaves were turning, and the air was crisp. I was in my freshman year of college with my future in front of me, but I had no desire to make it to the other side of the bridge. I couldn't choose a path for the rest of my life. I couldn't. Death was the easy, only, and best way out of the situation. If I was dead, I wouldn't be ashamed of failing and walking away from the Messiah and my responsibility. I wouldn't be another person who wasn't strong enough or good enough, who turned against God and killed God's heart. Or I wouldn't have to leave Adam. This would all be done. I stood on the bridge for 10 or 15 minutes, looking over the railing, studying the rocks with their jagged edges and the water calmly bubbling, thinking about the immediate release I would experience. I wanted to fall to my physical death to avoid falling, having sex outside of a blessed marriage, to my spiritual death. Eventually, I turned away and walked back to campus. Why? How? To this day, I don't know. Why did I return to my dorm and act as if nothing had happened? How did I find it in myself to do that? What got me through that moment? Was it what got me through everything leading up to that moment, and what would, hopefully, get me through everything else yet to come? I have no idea. People ask me now how I made it through without cracking, without succumbing, without being far too damaged. Again, I just don't know. Maybe I didn't jump to my death that day because jumping would have been admitting defeat, and I was too stubborn for that. Maybe there was a part of me that loved life and that somehow saw some possibility and hope, or some chance for peace, even with my turmoil. Maybe there was a will in me to survive. Maybe I was protected by some greater power in the universe. Maybe I do have a steel rod for a spine. Maybe I'm just lucky. I may have decided not to throw myself over the bridge that day, but I still didn't know how to throw off the shackles of the church, how to lessen its influence and control of my mind and life. I didn't know how to make a final choice to leave, and I didn't know how to be anything but a Moonie. I didn't know what not being a Moonie meant. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next speaker is CJ Hedrick. He's 33 years old and processes invoices at a pharmaceutical company in King of Prussia. His first ebook, The Murata Legacy, Ragnarok, is live on Amazon.com, and he will publish the second in a few months. Okay, go ahead, CJ.
Howdy, Hedrick, actually. So this is an excerpt from my upcoming book, The Murata Legacy, Doomsday. It's the second story in a planned trilogy. In this scene, we have our three protagonists: an experienced alchemist named Kitty, a skilled key shaper named Jubei, and a fledgling mage named Ruby. They're sitting together in a stand-in for Five Guys, as Jubei recounts his previous adventure. "But before we could think about the answer," said Jubei, 100 zombies burst from the ground. "Liar," said Ruby. "Fine, you got me. What really happened is we handed them over to the officials, reported to Grandma, and went home. Now, these Tanuma guys, what's their deal? A rival clan of Japanese adepts. Well, I say rival. In the beginning, Murata and Tanuma didn't really clash because an open war between two groups of adepts, well, you can't hide that sort of shit. They coexisted relatively peacefully until around the Industrial Revolution. By then, Grandma stopped wandering and settled down in Europe. Wandering? She and her descendants spent a lot of time touring the Asian countries and absorbing the local flavors, as well as their martial arts. Maybe staying at a new home every 30 to 50 years. But she saw an opportunity to settle down and started building a permanent foundation for the secondary Murata school in London. It was around this time she was considering passing down the mantle of charade keeper, since she'd been doing that for over 250 years. Not that I have any business asking. Isn't this the sort of thing she'd like to keep in the family? Normally, said Kitty, but she was eager to try a new training regiment to prepare her latest descendants for the next tournament, which would take up more of her time. Regimen? I said regiment just then, didn't I? Anyway, enter Tanuma. The current heads of the clan approached her, saying with their vast network, nothing would escape their notice. What kind of network? Like Yakuza? Something like that. But don't hold that against them. Grandma controlled the London mobs to cement her rise to power. She probably shouldn't have done it, but it seemed justified at the time. Seems the interview went badly. Apparently, the Tanuma leaders were more interested in the perks than the responsibility, and she turned them down. They considered it a personal slight, feeling she deliberately wasted their time, and declared a shadow war on all of Murata. They targeted Murata allies with street fights in Japan and England, so they couldn't openly defend themselves with their adept arts. They still do in Japan on a much lesser scale, but Victorian England was brutal. Wait, was Jack the Ripper to Numa targeting Murata allies? No, but I love where your mind went with that. Much better than Jubei's zombie story. Jubei glared at Kitty while Ruby shrank a bit. Luckily, Eiko lived long enough to withstand the sunk cost fallacy and saw the problem was, how did she put it? Like fixing a sinking ship by buying a $10,000 roll of tape. Well said. So she cut her losses and, along with her guardian and progeny, sailed to America. Deciding to start more low-key, she moved to Connecticut and opened an apartment building, with one of her guardians posing as the owner because nobody trusted a foreigner back in those days. Long story short, Eiko lived relatively happy ever after. The Tanuma still go after her, but since she's such a pillar to the community, they don't dare to try and declare open war on her. She does have to fend off an assassin once per year, but it's nothing she can't handle. She has to sleep with one eye open for the rest of her ageless life, and that's a happy ending? One person trying to actively kill her a year is a step up. Presidents have at least 1 million people who like to take a stab at them, and that's if they're in office for just 8 years. Imagine how many people and families should want her dead after 400 years. Well, I guess that makes sense when you put it like that, but still, you needn't worry about Grandma. She's tough as old boots, and twice as fashionable. Thank you.
Thanks, CJ.
Thanks, CJ.
Yep.
Okay.
Wish I had his voice.
Okay. Greg Fox recently retired after 20 years teaching writing at Phoenixville Middle School, with most of his time spent on the plethora of unfinished projects and hobbies he has been meaning to get to. It is a wonder he has time to sit and write. Warning, now that his paycheck is no longer coming from your taxes, he can say just about anything he wants. Go ahead, Greg.
Greg, you there?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go.
Start that clock again. All right. Saying that a novel was just a failed short story is like saying that a marriage is just a failed affair. This was the position taken by my grad school writing professor in Dirty Franks one night after class. I doubt I will ever be able to ever attempt to write something so ambitious as a novel, but I have since wondered then what makes for a successful affair. Well, let's face it, adultery is as ubiquitous as pharmaceutical ads during the Rachel Maddow show. As one of the 10 big no-nos sent down from Mount Sinai, it seems to be practiced quite frequently by those who preach against it the most. We were all unwillingly indoctrinated to the practice by much of our required reading in both high school and college. Madame Bovary, Lady Chatterley's Lover, The Great Gatsby, Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter, and of course, Poor Anna Karenina. Adultery also serves as the plot for some of Hollywood's most notable movies: Casablanca, Dr. Zhivago, Backstreet, The Graduate, Fatal Attraction, and so on. Now, since Mark is recording us for posterity, this seems like a good place to insert my disclaimer. I personally have enjoyed a blissful marriage for the past 35 years, so most of what follows is the result of my casual observations of my friend Larry Washburn. He lives 4 doors down from me with his wife, Maria. Her cell phone number is 610-825-1236. I know this because she sent me a barrage of angry text messages when she found Larry's burner phone sitting on the bathroom windowsill. Of course, Larry blamed everything on me, and like any good friend, I had Larry's back. But that was until he stiffed me the $250 I fronted for his Pink Floyd ticket a few years ago. Now I really don't care what happens to him. Then there's also this guy across the street who bought a boat that he keeps docked at the local marina. When the boat's in the water, it means the affair is on. But when the boat's out of the water, the affair is off. And it's not just a guy thing. Every now and then I catch the hot-to-trot woman next door sitting in her SUV, talking on her cell phone while her husband watches the hockey game in his man cave. So what's happening in your town? The way I see it, affairs are like cats. They just sort of happen. Ask any crazy cat lady who has an average of 7 cats, that is. You leave the door open and they casually saunter in, telegraphing their affections by flipping on their back with their feet in the air. And because they do that purring thing as they rub against your leg, you just can't send them away. All right, well, here's a lesson I was never able to preach in my middle school students. Always the teacher, I will attempt to prove that a successful affair mirrors the same 5-step formula used to construct a short story. You are encouraged to take notes. 1, exposition. This is where the setting is established and the hero and the characters are introduced to each other. Your coworker's wedding, the invitation came without a +1. Everyone is dressed and coiffed to the max. Damn, she looks good. Hey, Funky Town, you want to dance? 2, rising action. If nothing happens, there's no story. Bam, something happens. Sucking face in the coat check closet. Here's my number. Text me sometime. More rising action. Motel 6, it's cheap. See how it goes. Next time, the Ramada next to the Valley Forge Casino. Still rising. Dinner at Maggiano's. Oh crap, there's my wife's friend Angela. Hey Angela, fancy meeting you here. Oh no, we're just friends. 3, climax. This is where the story reaches the point of no return and the hero is forced to confront the situation at hand. A thong found in the back seat that isn't yours. A large cash withdrawal from your joint debit account. Oh, sweetheart, Angela said she saw you with some woman at Maggiano's last night. 4, falling action. This is how the hero reacts to the climax. You swear you just bumped into her when you were having a few beers with Kevin after work. Then you fell asleep in your truck. Hello, hey, yeah, that bitch Angela talked to my wife this morning. I think we need to cool it for a while. 5, resolution. This is where the hero reflects on his actions and atones for his failures. You begin to remodel the kitchen for your wife, just like you promised her you would. To conclude with a metaphor, keep your story short and you will be able to write many more.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Okay. Roseanne McGrath Brooks is a full-time editor, part-time college writing tutor, and recently published romance author. She has a BA in English and French and an MA in humanities. Roseanne lives in Westchester and with her husband, her minister husband, and their 2 diabetic cats. She has 2 children and 3 grandchildren, and as an extrovert, she can't wait until we start meeting in person again. Okay, go ahead, Roseanne.
Hi, I'll be reading from my book. It's called All for Good. It's a contemporary romance, the first book in a series. And This is about Emily and Daniel, their childhood friends. They're reconnecting, and they're just now at this point in the story starting to realize they have feelings for each other. "You're early," Emily squealed as she ran to meet them when they parked. "From inside, I could see the skis on top of the car, and I figured it must be you guys." "We had no traffic." Daniel stepped out of the car and hugged her briefly. Then he patted her head as he pulled back to survey her. "Nice hat, but you don't have a jacket on. You look like you're freezing." "I'm fine, but hurry up," Emily said, this time rubbing her legs, which were covered in what looked like light denim. "I hate to be cold." She followed Daniel as he walked around to open the back hatch. "They're all afraid of a little snow." Daniel's friend John had stepped out of the vehicle, as had the other men, and was walking toward Emily, arms outstretched. Daniel could have sworn his best friend's nearly black eyes sparkled with flirtation in his dark brown face as he flashed a brilliant smile. "Hey, I'm John. Do I get a hug too?" Emily embraced him and then hugged the other two men, who each introduced themselves and insisted on a hug as greeting as well. Daniel frowned at the twinges of jealousy he felt at the attention Emily was giving the other men, and he tried to shake off those feelings. He was sure those guys weren't Emily's type. And again, what was Emily's type? Did Emily think of him as her type? He definitely planned to say something this weekend about his growing interest in her, but he still wasn't sure exactly what it was he felt for her or how strong those feelings were. Someone slapped the back of his head, and Daniel realized that he was staring into the back of the SUV. "Are you still sleeping?" Jerry asked. Jerry was the jokester of the group, and his smile always seemed to go from his lips to the tips of his freckles and dark red hair. He turned to address Emily. Daniel snored the whole way here. Daniel glared at Jerry, then moved away, ducking his head to avoid another slap. He jerked the duffel and ski boots out of the back of the SUV, turned, and nearly knocked Emily over. He dropped his bag and caught her arm before she fell. She looked beautiful. Her hat was white wool, a white wool knitted cap pulled low on her head, and her blonde strands peeked out from the bottom edges to curl around her neck. Her royal blue cable knit turtleneck accented her eyes, and her cheeks were already pink from the cold. Nope, he didn't need to wonder what he felt for Emily. He was a goner. "Susie will be up in about an hour," Emily was saying as she took Daniel's ski boots from his hand and peeked into the storage section of the SUV, looking for more things to help carry. "Another lovely lady is joining us?" Jerry asked, both eyebrows raised. "I'm going to love this weekend." It was Daniel's turn to slap ahead. "We're here to ski, not fall in love," he reprimanded. Of course, he wasn't so sure about that for himself. Emily was shaking her head in mock chastisement. "We're all skiing and hanging out, and it's going to be great." Emily smiled, enjoying the men's banter. She was still a little surprised at how excited she felt, and she was pretty sure that her renewed attraction to Daniel was at least part of the reason for her excitement. She grabbed Daniel's elbow to pull him closer, ostensibly so that she could whisper in his ear. But she knew it was just nice to have the chance to touch him. His neck smelled good, a little spicy, and she momentarily forgot what she was going to say. Before she could open her mouth, his hair tickled her nose, which made her turn her head and sneeze. Daniel backed away to look at her, concerned. "God bless you." The others echoed the blessing. She laughed and leaned forward again, but spoke in a stage whisper in order that all could hear. "I was going to say that I want you to keep your eye on these guys this weekend. No funny business." Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Roseanne. Christopher Alden is a Coast Guard veteran living in the Philadelphia suburbs and writing fiction as well as creative nonfiction. His travels have given him unusual stories in unusual places, such as Antarctica, Greenland, and Cleveland. He serves on the board of the Brandywine Valley Writers Group and moderates writing critique workshops for Mainline Writers Group. In between reading and writing, he attempts home improvement projects or takes lessons from his rescue dog on how to be a better human. You can track him on Twitter at Twitter.com/Alden's Thoughts. No space. Take it away, Christopher. Chris.
Thanks, Evan. Everyone can hear me okay? Okay, these are 4 microfictions, 2 of which have been published. One is somewhere in the slush piles, awaiting the knife, and one is a work in progress. First one is called Storm Damage. After the burial, Ray wept upon his wife's headstone, feeling himself shrunken, reduced by half. 50 years of unshakable marriage severed when the old oak tree crashed through the bedroom roof, uprooted by the fury winds of a hurricane originating in an ocean he did not know or care about. All his decisions were singular now. Should he rebuild or relocate? FEMA had set up a hotline for survivors. He called, but there were no answers. Next, that's the one on the slush piles. This next one was published a couple years ago. It's called Jack Ruby Forgets His Gun, bit of a historical fiction. At the penultimate moment, I dig for my snub-nosed Colt, coming up empty. What the hell? Flashback, me clambering from my olds, thumb clicking the lockdown as I shut the door, an angry November gust stealing my fedora, the sun ricocheting off something on the passenger seat, blinding me. Now Oswald, crowded, pinched, and manacled, shuffles toward me. Lunging forward, I drive my fist deep into his yielding gut. His little face twists in painful surprise, Adam's apple bobbing furiously. Angry dragons pummel me to the cool pavement. Before blacking out, I see him smile, his story still alive. This third one is work in progress called Archaeology. Beth starts each breakfast by asking her husband if he remembers her. Tom offers a sad smile, always saying no. That's been his answer for 6 months since the stroke. His doctors advised Beth that recovery would be limited. Undaunted, she questions Tom while feeding him oatmeal and memories. She refuses to believe their 52-year marriage is now a one-sided affair. Spoonful after careful spoonful, they dig through history together, Beth searching for shards of recognition, and Tom content with nothing more than what he has at that moment. And the last one is published about a year ago. It's called Sacrificing. We scrabbled through a hole onto the roof, the scent of rising river water thick with danger. I watched the man help Granny into a basket. I sensed her fear and tried to jump in with her, but the man held me back. Then Granny rose, becoming smaller, sucked up through the air toward a whirring monster. The man knelt and stroked my face. I smelled his distress. Sorry, boy, he said. I'm not supposed to take dogs. I pleaded, licking his face and wagging my tail. The empty basket was coming down. He sighed. I hope you're worth the trouble. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, our final author is named Monica Shukla, and she is going to present a poem. Go ahead, Monica.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Just give me a minute. I'm just getting my poem up. Okay, hi everyone. I am an educator and I'm a mom of 2 teenage daughters, and I like to write slice of life short stories and poems as and when something inspires me. I am from India. I'm from a hill town in the Himalayan mountains, and I've lived in United States for about 20 years. So I'm going to read a poem called Beer Tales, and I wrote it when I went to India last time at this pub called Beer Tales. And let me start. Give me a second. Beer Tales. The ambience was demure, the lighting dim, the woodwork dense, the wrought iron slim. The murals were enticing. Those braids covered the entire walls. Hands on a hookah painted on the wall. The lights glittered and the bar beckoned. The cocktail spoke volumes. Hints of guava and a kick of spice. The music blared on, strumming out beats that knocked at the windows and tapped at your feet. Then a stream of appetizers appeared, fish with a certain sauce, and paneer with that hint of herbs. And then arrived something that tickled my palate and stirred my taste. The concept was interesting. I ate in haste. The kulcha with butter chicken. But how in the world, I wondered, would you stuff a round kulcha with curry? Anywho, on my platter sat 6 fat kulchas, white and round with little charred spots, stuffed with wicked curried butter chicken, spicy and delicious, melting in your mouth. As one dissolves, you wait with the anticipation of the next round dumpling. That's my poem.
Great.
Short and sweet.
Thank you. I'm just gonna take a second to thank all of you and who read and everyone who listened and didn't read this time. And I'm also just gonna finish with a short plug for my writers group that I lead. It's called Phoenix Fiction Writers. You can get the my email either from Mark or on the library website. We're actually dwindling right now in our participation just because longtime people have been kind of relocating and things like that. So we need new members, new blood, and you can get all that information from the library website. Yeah. Okay.
Evan, can I announce something also?
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, thanks. So 2 things. One is kind of a sister group to Evan's group. The Mainline Writers group meets online twice a month, and we don't do the same thing Evan's group does. Half of our meetings are programming. So if you're interested, go to Meetup and Mainline Writers group, and you can get more information. The second thing is we've been asked for the 3rd time to do a benefit for the Oxford Public Library, and that's going to happen October 27th. And it's a noir at a bar. And so we'll feature somewhere between 10 and 12 writers reading short stories, much like we did here, except it'll be live. This will be the first live event for them in a long time. Beautiful place to do it. They get us a great audience and it benefits the library. If anyone's interested, contact me at garyzanker@gmail.com. We have a couple more spaces for readers. And as I said, it's a live reading. So we'll all be reading from there because hopefully COVID by that time will be not done, but we won't be as worried about it. So support your public library, whichever library it is, including the Phoenixville Library.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. All right, feel free to unmute yourselves at this time if you'd like to give a comment or ask a question, any of the writers tonight. Thank them in person, sort of, virtually.
Well, I enjoyed everybody's stories as usual, and thanks for Mark for giving me the opportunity to read. Appreciate it.
Great thing. You guys always blow me away.
That was great.
Anyone else want to unmute? Hang around as long as you like to talk to each other, or you can call it a night.
Well, I have a question, Mark.
Yep.
You guys are recording this Zoom? And how do
Yes.
you get a hold of that?
It's just go to YouTube, put in Phoenixville Public Library, and you'll see all our videos there.
Okay.
There's also a link to our videos on our website too, which is www.phoenixvillelibrary.org.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Gary mentioned the Mainline Writers Group, and I'm a part of that. And we have I guess, a little subset group that once a month we do an online critique workshop. And we usually do about 4 pieces a month. And it's kind of a selection process, but I run the critique workshop, and most people have said, it's great. It helps them a lot. And we have a lot of fun doing it. So if you're interested, we just put out the call for interest for the May workshop, which I believe is on the 10th. It's the second Monday of the month. And everyone here is an accomplished writer. So, but we just ask that the first workshop that you attend will be as a reviewer, not as a writer. So, but open to everyone here.
I just wanted to thank Mark and the Phoenixville Library for this opportunity. I've never read for your group before, but I've been a listener and just am blown away by the writers, the stories that I get to listen to. It's just been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Yeah.
For me, it's a motivation to work on a story. When I see that it's going to be open mic night, I throw myself out there and say, yeah, sign me up. Now, what am I going to do? What am I working on? And which one would be good for 5 minutes? And so by having these, I don't know how everyone else does it, but that really works for me. I said, well, there's a deadline now, so get your act together and work on something. And so I wanted to also chime in with gratitude and thanks for pushing us a bit and encouraging us and giving us this opportunity.
I think what's interesting is, all of my pieces are just a little too long for this format, right? So it makes me sharpen and go back and say, okay, what could I eliminate here that isn't important, that won't impact the story? And when I'm done, I think, maybe it should have been that way to begin with. Maybe, it wasn't terrible the way it was, but it kind of works out fine after I've done the editing. So I do think that a time limit actually sharpens your writing skills. And we should all thank Evan as well, right? Always want to thank Mark. Also want to thank Evan for his role in it.
Now, this is my first time, and I was just wondering, do you like keep a list of who was on here and their bios anywhere or whatever? Because we might be interested to maybe try to find what they're working on. I tried to keep track, but.
Would you like everyone's bios? I could send that out.
Yeah, that would be helpful to me. I don't know.
Sure. I'll email that out to everybody.
Yeah, I think you did that in October.
Okay.
I have a message for CJ Hedrick. CJ, I wonder if you'd be a donor in a voice transplant.
Yeah, I do get a lot of notes about my voice.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it, but at least people like something.
It's a nice rich baritone and nice and clear as a bell.
I do talk a lot.
Well, don't wear it out. You might want to sell it. You already have a buyer.
So what's inspiring you guys these days?
I tell you that I belong to a group that Well, the premise was read modern plays aloud on Zoom, but we've drifted into reading not only plays, but poems and books. And so yesterday we just finished The Old Man and the Sea.
Mhm.
And it's been years. I can't even remember when or if I had read it. However, the that novella, I guess you could say, there is not a word wasted. Hemingway does not waste a word, and he does what everyone wants to do, which is choose the right word in the right word order.
Mhm.
Is how I see it, and it's just an amazing book. So that's inspired me for sure.
And
That was
Jeff,
the
hey
best.
Jeff,
Yeah.
give my regards to Carol. And why don't you, if you're not signed on for the Oxford Library reading, it's like, would you consider it? It's just a fabulous event.
We'd like to be lining. Oh, I would love to.
Gary Zenker's your guy to contact on that.
Drop me a note.
I will.
And it's live, right? We're all
Yeah, no
there.
problem. Good.
Okay.
Yeah,
What's-
Markowitz is another one of those guys with a rich baritone.
Yeah. What's inspiring the rest of you these days? I mean, it's a very interesting thing. We've had a year and a quarter, year and a half of kind of being locked away.
Fallow. It's like fallow.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I don't know about others. I actually have struggled to read this year. I haven't found it a struggle to continue to write, but I'm finding it very difficult to read, and I'm finding myself reading much shorter works now because I just have difficulty focusing long enough to really stay with the book. It's been interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not a Zoom guy. It's like every time I succeed in connecting on these, it's like a miracle, you know. In fact, even as we were screwing around today, my screen went black a couple of times. I have no idea why. I still can't see me on my own screen. I have no idea what's going on here, you know. But you know, what the hell?
I think we all got used to Zoom. You know, I wasn't one for FaceTiming, on the phone. I avoided it all the time. But since last year, what do you think? Everything is on Zoom. You know, even doctor appointments are on Zoom. So I think we all got used to it.
Yeah,
in a way, or had to.
And who was it who said, try again, fail again, fail better?
I think that's what everyone got used to, getting better and better at technology.
Oh my God.
That's whether we like it or not, it's become like a lifesaver for everyone. So we figured our way, fumbled across, and made Zoom work.
I've really found that the light in this darkness has been Zoom, in that I never could have read like this. I've done it once in person before, and it was nerve-wracking, but I've been able to do things on Zoom that I could never do before in person. I lead a ukulele jam for 2 hours online once a month, and I could never play and sing in front of people in real person, but something about Zoom, I can participate in these readings, I can participate in other classes and the jams, and I'm going to take this away as a blessing after this is over.
Sure.
Going back to the question regarding what's inspiring us to write, I have been, this semester, I'm teaching a class in short stories in Spanish. And I don't usually teach literature, I'm a linguist. but short stories, it's a fairly low level. And I've challenged my students to write a story. And I feel like a little bit of a fraud because I write in Spanish, but it's all academic what I write. And so when I write short stories in English, I have a repertoire that I do not have in Spanish, even though I've been a Spanish speaker for a very long time. It's not my native language. So for me, writing short stories in English and writing these kind of short stories, you know, these essays about my life, it's like eating candy because it's so delicious and fun. And academic writing is, you know, a little more like weightlifting. So for me, that's been an inspiration, but now I feel like maybe I ought to write a story in Spanish because, you know, I'm having them do it. And
Right.
I feel like I should step up to the plate. Mum's the word. They don't know. I've never done it in Spanish. But I'm challenged because, of course, they're the great writers of Spanish short fiction, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Julio Cortázar, and just to dig in there and analyze with my students and be challenged by them has been an inspiration, and hopefully some people love it.
I find two things, right? One is the short everyday events that happen, right? Go to the supermarket, you're in line with someone says a line, and all of a sudden kind of picture a story popping out of that completely, whether it has anything to do with the situation you're in or not. So I've always been focused like that, but I'm more attentive on listening to lines that inspire me, right? Like I'm in conversations and someone said to me the other day, this should have made me happy. And I go, oh my God, that is the perfect first line for a story. Because it makes you ask, well, what the hell is behind that statement? What is it? I always look for these first lines that people throw out as part of a conversation that really just become their own story. That and I'll tell you that because we run two writers groups, the mainline one and the Wilmington one, although we've combined them. When other people read their stories, I don't know about any of you, whether you stick to your genre, but I go, oh my God, you know, so-and-so's story is so brilliant and it's a romance. And I go, oh, could I write a romance in 1,000 words and make it believable and make it as good as a 3,000 or 4,000 word story? And that's how Noir de Bar started, right? Because they go, oh, someone wrote this great Noir story. Could I do that in 1,000 words? So I just wonder if any of you, if that kind of thing happens to you, where you listen to something, you go, yeah, I got to try that, right? I got to break out of what I do and I got to try that tomorrow.
Well, something to that extent. But actually, I have this unfortunate tendency to think of what would be a cool action sequence and then write my stories around that.
See, that's interesting. And it's interesting how everyone differently cycles through, right? Mine's the first line. Yours is the action sequence and right around it. How about anyone else?
Yeah, well, I've given a lot of thought because having been a writer now for about 10 or 11 years, I inadvertently noticed a pattern in my writing, which caused me to think about it. Now, of course, I clearly am a crime writer, but the reason I'm a crime writer is because I look for my stories to be edifying, right? Without being polemical, right? But nevertheless, edifying in some moral kind of way. So it drives me, there's some moral conundrum or some moral kind of principle that I think about, that I contemplate, or maybe came to my attention from the news, right? So that will then, once I consider a moral conundrum of some kind, then it becomes a matter of building a story around it.
Okay, I know it's getting late. You're probably getting hungry. Let's put the water on. You're not hungry?
It's so interesting, right? I think that I wonder how many of you look at your own work and realize what the pattern is in your pieces across them, right? Because there is one. There's going to be one. No one writes randomly. It's just, do you recognize it, and what is that pattern? Hey, Jim, what are you saying?
A couple of responses to what I've heard. To what you said. What has freed me up? Time. Right now, I'm not teaching environmental law, and that took a lot of time out of my life. It's too much time, and I don't really. I'm fine. Frees me up to write. I do most of my writing in the morning. Now I'm talking about writing in Spanish. I speak Italian, and I write my first drafts in Italian, with one exception. If it's dialect, well, then I don't know where to go. I'll forget what my dialect was. So if it's standard English, I write it in Italian. The reason I do that is I can write faster in Italian. So it's a matter of getting it down on paper by hand before I start typing. Somebody mentioned reading. I keep reading. I try to read. I watch a lot of cinema. I've been into French. I just rediscovered French New Wave. I've been into Italian cinema. And if I can't read, I put it down. I just put down my friend Norman Mailer. I got 3/4 of the way through this book, and I figured, well, I got to put it down because I'm spending too much time on it. So I'm picking up novellas, short stories, and I'll give you a quick background. The story I wrote and published in 1974. Now I gutted everything.
I turned my video on.
I gutted everything to get it down to the 5-minute thing, and I kept only 2 words. Now, I'll be doing it in critique in the next few weeks. And so as an added special attraction to the listeners, I'll do the same thing I do with my undergraduates. I'll give them extra credit if they can point out the 2 words that they think I kept. People go nuts over extra credit,
Yeah.
And I feel sorry for these kids. Usually I like to give them like, how long did the 100 years war last? Or how long did the 30 years war last? But the real brain twister is, how long did the 6-day war last? Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I should probably be heading out too. Y'all have a good one.
too. I wanted to make a plug for Story a Day in May and Julie Duffy. That's coming up, where you write a story a day in May. But I use for inspiration the little story sparks that you can get on her website. And they're just a little booklet. And I keep them everywhere in my house and in the car and in the purse. And whenever I get a line or I get an idea or anything that I want to remember, I've always got these so close, just a breath away. And then when I fill up them, I put them in this little box and I've got all my ideas. And when I need an idea, I just open the box and I pick one out and I go, well, that's the one. And that, because this time in the pandemic, they talk about brain fog, COVID brain, and I really think it's true. Our minds are so filled with so many things that we don't have control over that me personally, I've had a hard time writing during this time, even though this is the time that I've had a lot of time. So sometimes I'll just pick up a story, story spark booklet that I've written in, before COVID and go, oh yeah, I remember that. And that's where I'll get my idea from. So Story a Day in May.
And Julie has a great, it's Scottish accent, right? That she's just.
Oh, it's delicious.
Awesome to listen to, right? Just awesome.
Oh my gosh, I could listen to her reading a phone book.
Yeah.
I listened to some of her podcasts with my husband in the background. He's going, oh, I love that voice. It's great.
Another thing, Gary, is my last 2 books, meaning the one I'm shopping now, was based on the 1985 MOVE conflagration in Philadelphia. And my current work in progress is based on 50,000 words in, is based on the Ira Einhorn case. So I stumbled on, not intentionally, I just stumbled on writing fiction based on true crime. And what that does for me is, because I always have considered a weakness to be plotting. It's one thing to have a facility for language and another thing to tell a story. So in that tell a story category, I always felt my plots were contrived or forced. Well, when I borrow ideas from like true crime, I know what the plot's going to be, so that takes care of that problem for me. Now all I need to do is fictionalize a
Sure.
lot of it. So that is, and I may, and after I finish this book, I may do that yet again. I don't have any crime in mind, but I like the idea of writing fiction based on real life incidents.
That's cool.
I've got the maybe the somewhat opposite challenge from you, Gary. Is I've kicked the tires in the last year, 2 years, maybe even longer. I've decided I've kicked the tires on almost everything. Horror stories, microfiction, flash fiction, weird flash fiction, humorous essays, political writing. I've been poking my pen around in just about everything, and sometimes it's comes up somewhat readable, and other times it's it's just it should be buried on the lawn with the dog doo doo.
But there's nothing that says that the first time that you do a new genre that you should.
Well, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm searching for my voice, because if you look at my reading, there's nothing. There's no common thread through all of it, except the grammatical errors. So, but there's no voice yet. I'm still searching for the voice, and I have the most fun writing humorous essays, kind of modeled a little bit on David Sedaris and the absurdity of life, because life is absurd, and I always notice the absurdity, it seems. So I have no problems getting ideas.
आज बस हो गया हाँ हो गया
So, but yeah, I'm still, I'm still poking around.
Okay, folks, I turn into a pumpkin about this time of night, so I'm going to sign off. Mark, thanks so much. Evan, thanks again. Guys, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Lanny.
Jim.
All right, I think we should call it a
Everybody see you in
night.
Oxford, Jim.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get going too. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was wonderful.
Welcome.
See you,
Great
folks.
discussion afterwards too. Thank you, Gary.
See y'all later. Have a good night.
Hey, Mark, do you have 1 minute to talk to me?
Let me stop the recording.
Yeah.
Thank you.